Hello, I'm Rachel Suppak, and for this project, I created the Harrisburg, Pennsylvania Digital Collection. Harrisburg is the city in which I currently live, which is part of the reason I chose to make my digital library focus on it. I've only lived here for about 3 years, but it is a small city, so I think I know it pretty well at this point. It is the capital city of Pennsylvania, and it is located in south central Pennsylvania, not quite equidistant from Pittsburgh in the west and Philadelphia in the east. The city is located on the eastern bank of the Susquehanna River, which is what made it a desirable location when Europeans first settled here almost 300 years ago. Of course, it was also a desirable location for Native Americans long before that, and they called the area Paxtang, which is actually still the name of a local township. For my digital collection, I used a variety of media and file formats. For images, I used JPEGs and PDFs, JPEG mostly for single images, and PDF when I wanted to combine quite a few images into one item. I also used PDFs for some educational pamphlets and different text-based materials that I used. I have an MP3 audio file. For videos, I was going to try to embed the actual videos in my collection, but as many people had an issue with size, so did I. And actually, I had 3 videos that are all on the same webpage, so it was much simpler to just link to them. And that also eliminated any copyright issues, as these videos are very new and are certainly still under copyright. I also included a hyperlink to a couple of relevant websites that had information that I thought was best viewed in the site, and also to give credit to the people who actually created those. So speaking of copyright, my items fell into a variety of categories. I have several things that are in the public domain because they were created before 1923 or copyright has already elapsed. I used hyperlinks for some things that were created more recently in order to avoid copyright issues. For a couple of things, I would argue fair use in that I am using one photograph from a collection of photographs, and I am not making any money off of them. This is purely educational purposes. For one item, I did email the archivist who is in charge of the collection to ask about copyright. I have not heard back from them yet. So I would take that down if they had any issue or link to it instead. And then a number of items are personal photographs because, as I mentioned, I do live in Harrisburg. And so for those, there's, of course, no copyright issue. Potential audiences for my collection, I would think, would be teachers and students, especially those who live in the Harrisburg area, especially, elementary and middle school students, since the information I have is fairly basic and it is a small collection. Also, any Harrisburg residents who are interested in more about the history. I know I learned some things I didn't know from this. For example, I didn't know that the Capitol had burnt down, and while it was burnt down, the state legislature actually met in one of the churches that I have photographs of on the site. And it could also be useful for researchers or historians, whether in the Harrisburg area or elsewhere. I decided to use Library of Congress subject headings as the controlled vocabulary for my subjects. I added the headings that you see here manually, including Harrisburg, PA, Pennsylvania State Capitol, quite a few things about churches, Susquehanna River, etc. The suggested topics I chose to include were churches of Harrisburg, the state capitol, and the Susquehanna River. I chose those topics because as I was assembling the collection, those were recurring themes I saw emerging. As an older city, Harrisburg has a lot of old and historically significant churches. The Capitol building that was originally built in the city in the 1800s burned down in 1897. So it has had multiple rebuildings and redesigns since then, and I tried to showcase all of those in the collection. And then the river naturally plays a big role in the city, especially when it floods, as it has done fairly often in the city's history. In order to evaluate this digital library, I would focus on usability. Rather than do a heuristic evaluation and get the input of experts, I want the input of users, since I think the collection would appeal mostly to casual users. I would conduct the usability evaluation by observing users conducting searches and browsing the collection, and then administer a survey afterwards to see how satisfied they were with the library's performance. I could also evaluate transaction logs to see how other users outside of those that I personally observe use the collection. Now let's take a look at the actual collection. So here we have the home page, which has the rotating items at the top and also has a brief blurb about the collection explaining the significance of Harrisburg and giving some themes for the collection. You can also see the suggested topics I mentioned before are linked from the home page. If you go to Browse, you will see those suggested topics again. And I chose to do my results screen as a grid, so you can see the thumbnail, but then I also included the title, date created, subject, and description, since the other option was to include mostly just the thumbnails, but I felt that in this case, without the context of the date, subject, and description, the thumbnails on themselves didn't do a whole lot, so I chose to present it in this way. Also, I kept the font pretty simple. I did a light blue background with black text or dark blue text for links because I thought the contrast there would be good and it would just be easy to read. For my advanced search, I have options to search title, subject, description, and date created. I thought those would be the most helpful and also intuitive ways to search the collection. For example, if you were specifically trying to search for a church, and you could search that in title, subject, or description, and you would probably be able to get what you're looking for, because I do try to include those keywords in all of those. And see here, we have the 4 churches of Harrisburg that I also have over here. So you can see that Churches of Harrisburg 4 and all 4 of them show up here. I tried to make the searching just as easy as possible. On the About page, I have information about Harrisburg again, you might recognize from the home page. And then for FAQ and help, I attached this PDF just offering some tips on navigation, my contact information, and a little bit of information about Harrisburg, since I realize it's a city that some people might never have heard of. So thank you for taking the time to watch my presentation, and I hope you check out the collection.